the teacher, she said, and by the way, just so everybody knows, marriage is between one man and one woman, kind of like looks around the room. Everybody got that? Good. Moving on.
This ties in to a major news story that a lot of people said was not possible, which is, according to an Economist YouGov poll, so it's not necessarily a right-wing poll, support for same-sex marriage, so-called, has fallen to 54%. And this is one of these issues. I grew up, I'm old enough to remember when marriage was between a man and a woman. And some of our audience actually is probably so young they don't remember that. Then you get 2015, Obergefell, the Supreme Court redefines marriage. That push had been building for some time, really since Will and Grace in the late 90s. And then it stopped being a political issue. And there were a handful of us who said, yo, guys, you can't give up on marriage. It's the fundamental political institution. But all the Republicans, virtually all of the prominent conservatives, they said, now, guys, we lost marriage. Move on. Obergefell will never be overturned. This is just how it is now. And I thought, there's no way, right? This is the basic political unit. The gods of the copybook headings are going to come back. Is this a sign that we will see the overturning of Obergefell and the restatement of proper, true marriage? Jack, is Obergefell getting overruled?
I think if you look at the traction, right? If you look at the traction where it's going on this, and Obergefell, people could say what they want, and I think it's actually a separate issue from same-sex marriage, even though it's sort of like in political psychology isn't, because we know that the justices take up cases based on public opinion. We certainly know that Roberts has done this. It's been sort of a hallmark of his time on the court. That, look, it was not properly judged in the same way that Roe v. Wade was not properly judged. This is just not something that's covered in the Constitution. It's not there. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It's certainly not in any of the amendments. Marriage was always a state institution. It is covered by the 10th Amendment because no powers that are given to the federal government all of those are left with the states. And so it's always been that way. And they can't just write things into the Constitution. No one ever tried to put this up. No one ever tried to make this an amendment. They just sort of pushed it through the courts, which we've seen the left doing since the 1960s. If they can't win at the ballot box, they go to the courtroom. And so it is something where when you realize that, look, and you mentioned there weren't a lot of Republicans and conservatives that spoke out, but the very first Republican that I ever worked for many moons ago, first as an intern, as a campaign staffer, was Rick Santorum.
Yeah.
And Rick Santorum, my senator in Pennsylvania, he took a lot of flack, and people can go back and look at his comments, which were colorful, to say the least, about this. And he said, if you put this into practice, right, if you put it into law and try it anywhere, that what it will do will open up a Pandora's box of trouble, where if you say that anything can be marriage, then all of a sudden you will completely distort society. And it won't just be men and women, but we'll have all sorts of relationships being enshrined in government, being enshrined by government in law. And guess what? That's exactly what we're seeing. Certainly with the rise of surrogacy, certainly with the rise of new technologies, we're now seeing like polyamorous marriages and children being raised by 3 fathers and 3 women and all sorts of just complete and utter wildness, which ultimately always turns out very badly for the children.
Hold on one second. Go to preborn.com/Knowles, Knowles. We are living at a time when lies are easy and the truth is costly. Nowhere is that clearer and more devastating than in the battle for life. That is exactly the issue Natalia faced. When she first learned about her pregnancy, Natalia considered abortion. She was influenced by the messaging she'd been exposed to all the time. Everything changed when she heard her baby's heartbeat. In that moment, she felt a divine calling to continue her pregnancy. Trusting God would make a way forward. Natalia chose life. She found herself surrounded by the love, support, and resources she needed. At Preborn Network clinics, this happens on average 200 times a day because of the support from people like you. Mothers who are overwhelmed and pressured, they see their child, they hear the truth, they realize that they are not alone. That moment costs $28. $28 to sponsor an ultrasound doubles a baby's chance at life. This is not the time for silence. It is a time for truth. I personally support this organization. I think it is terrific. Right now, you can dial pound 250 keyword baby, or you can go to preborn.com/Knowles, preborn.com/Knowles. Give what you can, please.
And so, he took a lot of flack for that. If anyone remembers the comments I'm referring to from like 05, 06, you'll know what I'm saying. That it's something where he was completely right, because they didn't stop there. That's what led to the push for the trans movement. That's what led to like Drag Queen Story Hour and all the rest of it. Because the minute that they got that, the entire machinery, the political machinery that they had built, or starting with, by the way, you're totally right on Will and Grace. That was like the first, and then Modern Family became the second. This is the mass media. This is the mass normalization of this type of stuff. And it was pushed on society in a way that nobody ever really sat down and had a debate about. We just sort of were told that we have to accept this. And they've completely gone over the rails with it. And a lot of people are pointing back to 2013, really a lot of these bad decisions, bad policies that came out of the Obama era, that it's time to take a look at it again. And I will, by the way, just add as an anecdote. So my oldest son, he had his first reconciliation class a couple of nights ago. And since it was the first class, we were sort of talking about all of the sacraments. And when they brought up matrimony, the teacher, she said, and by the way, just so everybody knows, marriage is between one man and one woman. Kind of like looks around the room. Everybody got that? Good. Moving on.
Well, even it's so funny. It only occurred to me recently. The word matrimony comes from the word mater, like mother in Latin. And so the notion that you could have matrimony between two men is undercut by the very word itself. Yes, Rick Santorum is one of the most vindicated men in America. Every day that goes by, he is more and more vindicated. And you make a good point on Obergefell being different from same-sex marriage, quote unquote. I do wonder, though, on the state versus federal issue. I remember I was a student and I got to talk to Scalia once or twice. And one of the times, one of the students asked him about marriage and whether it was a state's issue or federal issue. And he said, well, the problem is it's very hard for it to be a state's issue because you can't have a country where someone is married in Massachusetts but not married in Oklahoma. What happens when they move? What happens when they travel? So it creates
this is
problems.
What they did with the Massachusetts, I think it was Massachusetts was the first state, and this is exactly what they were trying to do with that under the contract clause of the Constitution. It's same idea as having a driver's license in one state. You shouldn't have to get a driver's license in every state.
Yeah. So then my question is, regardless of what I actually have two questions. We were told that this issue, like abortion and Roe v. Wade, was just done. It was set in law. It was never going to be overturned in our lifetimes. Two questions. Will we see the overruling of Obergefell in our lifetime? And on any kind of grounds, on textualist grounds, originalist grounds, or substantive grounds? And two, will we see the majority of people turn against gay marriage, so-called, in our lifetimes?
I think we will. I think, and I caught what you were saying about Gen Z. I caught what you're saying about the polling on this. I think a lot of people realize, especially Gen Z, when they look at, sort of the laws that came out of the 60s that was sort of seen as the boomer era, then the laws that came out of the 90s, the Gen X era, and then the laws that came out of Obama and the policy changes. This was the millennial era of politics where they had primacy. And the idea being that everything has gone a little bit too far in one direction, and we need to look at things that we want to reel back. And you look at some of those big changes, there's no way that you can say Obergefell wasn't a major change to the way things have been done. By the way, not just in the United States of America, throughout all of human history. Yeah. The nuclear family is the oldest institution on planet Earth. It predates literally everything. It predates the Bible. It predates history itself. We go into the caves of the cavemen. And what do we find? We find mom, dad, kids. It's all there.
Yeah, I agree. I just think these people who thought that they were going to bet on their own ideology over human nature and the fact that we're social creatures and coupling creatures and biological creatures, that was really a bad bet. That was a great clip. Now stop, ring the bell, subscribe. See you next time.